Panama, a pristine paradise in the middle of the ocean, with soft white sands, crystal clear waters, and abundant wildlife. This island is the perfect destination for adventure seekers and survival enthusiasts. Today, Ed Stafford begins his 10-day survival challenge here. Let's see how he navigates this resource-rich environment. Don't forget to comment below on the moment that impressed you the most in Ed's survival journey. Let's get started. This time, survival expert Ed feels a bit scared on his way to the survival site. Maybe he's afraid that the animals here won't be able to survive his ravenous stomach. After landing safely from the plane, Ed Stafford quickly swims to shore to begin the challenge. Since he had to swim quite a distance from the landing spot to the shore, Ed felt a bit exhausted. He decided to take a short rest while also planning for this survival journey. Water is always the first concern when surviving on a deserted island. Looking around, Ed spotted a few coconut trees nearby. Coconut water could temporarily keep him from getting dehydrated. He walked over to the coconut tree and picked up the fallen coconuts from the ground to extract their water. They were full of liquid and incredibly nutritious. He walked along the shoreline, searching for a large, sharp rock to crack open the coconut. He struck the coconut hard against the sharp edge of the rock, allowing him to crack it open and enjoy the sweet, refreshing water inside. Not stopping there, he continued hitting the coconut against the rock to access the white, protein-rich flesh inside. With both water and food temporarily secured, Ed felt less pressure about finding sustenance for now. Not far from his landing spot, Ed discovered a dried-up stream leading to the sea. Although it had completely run dry, the light gray soil indicated that there might still be fresh water beneath the surface. He kept digging tirelessly under the scorching sun, determined to find water. However, after more than 30 minutes of effort, the result was disappointing. Beneath the soil was a solid layer of rock with not a single drop of fresh water. Ed had no choice but to keep walking upstream along the riverbed, hoping to find a water hole that hadn't dried up. However, reality struck him hard once again. The riverbed was covered in sharp thorns, making it extremely unfriendly for bare feet. After just 50 meters, he had already stepped on 3 thorns. Defeated, he decided to return to camp and use technology to help him explore the environment. The scenery here was truly breathtaking, with the blue sea and golden sand stretching endlessly. It lifted Ed's spirits, easing the disappointment he had felt moments ago. He spotted signs of a freshwater source nearby and decided to relocate his camp. However, it was already too late to move. The most urgent task now was to build a shelter for the night. Ed picked up a piece of plastic to use as a pillow and built a wind-blocking wall out of sand. With that, his overnight shelter was complete. On the morning of the second day, Ed was jolted awake by the bone-chilling sea breeze. As soon as the sun rose, he set off, walking along the beach toward the spot he had discovered the day before. But now, he found himself in a tough situation, hungry, thirsty, and carrying nearly 10 kilograms of equipment. Realizing he couldn't walk the distance efficiently, Ed decided to build a raft and paddle his way to the new camp. Ed gathered all the available materials on the island to begin crafting his raft. After more than 2 hours of gathering materials, noon had arrived. The scorching midday sun could easily burn his skin, so Ed looked for some shade to rest for a while. Suddenly, he noticed a tree nearby, known as the death apple. This fruit was extremely toxic and completely inedible. Luckily, he spotted some large Indian almond trees overhead. The only downside was that their fruits weren't ripe yet. With no other option, he had to replenish his energy with another coconut. After his break, Ed quickly moved all the gathered materials to his shelter and began building his raft. He wanted to finish it as soon as possible to relocate to a better spot. He had no idea how much time had passed, but finally, the raft was complete. However, after a long day of exhausting work, he was too drained to paddle. In his current state, setting off wasn't an option. So, he decided to stay and rest for another night before continuing his journey. By noon the next day, before heading out to sea, Ed needed to replenish his energy. While searching along the beach, he came across some noni fruit. Taking a bite, he found the taste incredibly unpleasant, but since it wasn't harmful and could provide some much-needed energy, he forced himself to eat it. After replenishing his energy, he set off, paddling his way toward his new shelter. Using all his strength to paddle continuously, after 3 exhausting hours, he finally reached his new camp. This journey had truly exhausted him. Ed had no choice but to lie down and rest for a while before continuing his adventure. After a few minutes of rest, Ed hurried off in search of a river. He was eager to find his first source of fresh water on the island. Sure enough, fate didn't abandon him. Ed was surprised to find water beneath a large rock. However, it looked quite murky. So, he carefully collected it in plastic bottles and carried them with him, planning to purify it later. Next, he designed a water filtration device using a plastic bottle. First, he shredded dry coconut fibers to create the initial filter layer. Then, he added a layer of charcoal, followed by a final layer of leaves and pebbles collected from the beach. With that, his makeshift water filter was complete. Ed's homemade water filter worked surprisingly well, making the water much clearer. To ensure it was safe to drink, he placed the bottles under the sun, using UV rays to kill any remaining bacteria before consuming it. After 4 hours of sun exposure, the water was finally safe to drink. Ed took his first sip of fresh water on the island, and with a look of pure relief, he downed an entire bottle. It was clear that he had been pushed to the absolute limit of thirst. Stepping into the 4th day of the challenge, Ed decided to make a fire and actively search for food. He found a pile of dry branches along the beach, which had the perfect texture for fire starting. This time, he chose the classic friction method, rubbing 2 dry sticks together. As the temperature increased, a tiny ember formed. He carefully placed it into a bundle of coconut fibers, gently swaying it in the wind a few times. And just like that, flames burst to life. He flashed a satisfied smile as the flames came to life. Next, Ed hung a plastic bottle filled with water over the fire. This would help warm the water, making it more comfortable to drink and possibly safer. Suddenly, he spotted a snake slithering out of the bushes, weighing at least 2 kilograms. However, Ed had no intention of harming it. Surviving and growing on this harsh island was no easy feat, so without hesitation, Ed planned to head to the beach to search for food. But first, he wanted a hot cup of tea to warm his heart and stomach. This small comfort lifted his spirits significantly compared to the previous days. After enjoying a cup of hot tea, Ed set out to the rocky shore to search for food. Thanks to the low tide, he easily caught some fresh seafood for dinner. This little crab is really cute, but Ed chose it as the main dish for tonight's dinner. Since he couldn't find anything to cook the seafood with, Ed had no choice but to use plastic to cook his meal. At night, Ed sat down to enjoy his dinner. He picked up a starfish leg and took a bite, but he quickly spat it out. The taste was absolutely terrible. Crab and turban snails were the real meal, providing Ed with a much-needed protein boost for his body. At the crack of dawn, he launched his drone to scan the surrounding area. This time, it spotted a mangrove forest on the other side of the island, possibly home to clams, blue crabs, fish, and other wildlife. Without hesitation, Ed set off toward the forest. Along the way, he unexpectedly came across a large number of lemons. Knowing they would come in handy later, he quickly filled 2 bags with them before hopping onto his homemade raft to reach the mangrove forest on the other side of the island. After making a small loop around the island, Ed finally arrived at his destination just before reaching his physical limit. He secured the raft tightly to prevent it from being swept away by the water. Then, without a second thought, he rushed into the forest. Through the underwater camera, we could see plenty of fish. Ed used his hands to dig through the mud, knowing that clams lived there. Before long, he unearthed his first clam. His heart finally felt at ease. At last, he was going to have a proper meal after days of hardship. 1, then 2, 3, and even more. Ed's face lit up with a satisfied smile. In total, he caught 26 large clams, enough for a delicious meal. Ed sailed home on his battleship, grilled the clams over hot coals, then carefully peeled each one, setting the meat aside. Finally, he squeezed fresh lemon juice over them and let them marinate. Now it's time for him to rest. Ed stretched out a large fishing net and secured it between 2 tree trunks to make a hammock. Lying back and relaxing, he started thinking about his plans for the next days of his survival journey. After a 2-hour nap, He woke up and enjoyed his lime-marinated clams. To make eating easier, he crafted a pair of chopsticks. The dish had a rich, protein-packed flavor, but it was quite fishy, definitely not for those who can't handle raw food. However, since Ed is a survival expert, he ate them with ease. After eating to his heart's content, he lay back in his hammock, enjoying this fun survival journey. For the next few days, he gathered food from the rocky shore and mangrove forest, making life quite comfortable until the 9th day. Early in the morning, Ed spotted footprints of some creature on the beach. Guessing that it had more meat than clams, he decided to catch it. He crafted a simple trap using a fishing net weighted with stones, then set it up on the beach. Hiding in the forest, he patiently waited for his prey to appear. He had no idea how long he had been waiting, but finally, the main character appeared on the camera. With precise aim, he threw the net. Yahoo! The prey was caught. After handling the prey, he returned to the island and started roasting it. Along the way, he had collected some bird eggs, which he decided to boil. Ed couldn't wait any longer and ate the eggs just a few minutes after putting them in the water. As a result, they weren't fully cooked, but he still enjoyed them without hesitation. After that, he made himself a glass of lemonade before diving into the main dish. The charcoal-grilled monitor lizard was delicious. Its firm, flavorful meat made Ed very satisfied. It tasted somewhat like tender, juicy chicken and could provide at least 500 calories when fully digested, enough to comfort his stomach after going so long without eating meat. Next, he enjoyed a homemade cup of fragrant lemon tea to aid digestion. He went to sleep after eating and drinking enough. On the morning of the 10th day, it signaled the successful conclusion of this exciting journey.